Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And um with college football and the NFL coming back soon, with obviously college football games coming at the end of the month and the preseason for the NFL coming up, I figured why not start doing my season predictions for college football and the NFL, starting with college football, going conference by conference. If you haven't checked out my Big Ten video that I did yesterday, you should go check it out because got some pretty interesting takes. But today's video will be the SEC. And so, with no further ado, let us get into it. Starting off with week one, there are no week zero games for the SEC, um, which I don't know if they've ever had. They maybe have had a couple, but it's not usually. But I'm gonna go through most of these games because they're not really going to be that competitive. Like Missouri's gonna beat Arkansas Pine Bluff. I do think, um, I did think Louisiana Monroe could give Mississippi State a scare, but I think the Bulldogs get the win. A&M should beat Missouri State. Georgia should beat, who is that? I think it's Tennessee State, I want to say. Um, Vanderbilt, speaking of Tennessee, should beat Austin P. Tennessee should beat Fordham. Texas, I think, should beat Texas State. Kentucky should beat Youngstown State. Arkansas taking on, who is that? Who is that? Is North Alabama. I think the Razorbacks should win. Sooners should beat UTEP. South Carolina should beat Kent State. Florida should beat FAU. Alabama, I think, should beat ECU. And funny enough, the three biggest games for the SEC come at the bottom. Starting off, Baylor, Auburn, not at Jordan Hare, which is a little disappointing after the game last year in Waco when Baylor was at home. So it is kind of disappointing, but should be an entertaining game. Two teams with new quarterbacks. Auburn with a new head coach and Alex Scolish. So should be a fun game. I think the Tigers in a neutral site game should get the win. Clemson, LSU, the two Tigers, the two Death Valley. You know, which one's the real one? We saw LSU go into Clemson's Death Valley and win. Could the Tigers of Clemson come into LSU's Death Valley and get the win? Lane Kiffin's debut as a coach. I could see Clemson win this game, but I think LSU, the more talented team, gets the win. And then Louisville, Ole Miss, another ACC SEC game. And I think Louisville gets the win, which I know might seem like a hot take, but you know, Ole Miss, new head coach and Pete Golding. Yes, they have most of the same players and coaching staff on the defense, but it is new on the offense. And I feel like a neutral site game against a Louisville team that, you know, always seems to get up for these big time games. Like under Jeff Brom, Louisville's always been, you know, pulling off these big upsets. Even when he was at Purdue, he's always been able to pull off these big upsets against these considered better schools. And I feel like Louisville can get the win. And, you know, depending on where these two teams are ranked, this could be that top 10 loss that we've seen the last, I think, 5 seasons now. But moving on to week two, which a couple of these week two games I've already been penciled in because I did my Big Ten picks. So I've got Minnesota over Mississippi State, Michigan over Oklahoma, and then I got Texas beating Ohio State. But let's go through some of the games. Like Vanderbilt, Delaware. I mean, it's fun seeing Delaware, um, going up against power conference teams. But I think Vanderbilt should take care of business. LSU should beat Louisiana Tech. Um, it's not really much to say. Florida, I think should beat Campbell. South Carolina should beat Towson. The Auburn Southern Miss game could be interesting depending on how Auburn plays against Baylor. But I do think the Tigers get the win. Ole Miss should beat Charlotte. And I think Georgia definitely will beat Western Kentucky, but we've got some um, big time matchups in week two, including our first conference game, Bama, Kentucky. And this is one of those games we've seen under Kalen DeBoer, Alabama lose. Like we saw first year lost to Vanderbilt, not that great of a Vanderbilt team. And then last year, they lose to Florida State, finishes, without a finishes with 5 wins. They nearly lost to South Carolina. Like they do have this tendency to like play these teams, especially on the road. They tend to play sleepy, and it could cost them. This could be like a huge upset win for Will Stein in Kentucky. I think Bama does get the win, stays undefeated. Missouri, Kansas State, the border war could be the last time we see this for a while because it was a while before these two matchups. After Missouri left the Big 12, Kansas, decent Big 12 program, but I think even though they are at home, it will be a good game. I think Missouri does get the win. Went on to ASU A&M. Should be a very fun game. Arizona State seems to love playing these SEC teams. They played Mississippi State last year. Um, I think they play LSU either next year in like a couple of years. So Arizona State, one team that like is trying to play these SEC teams. And you know what? I'm gonna say the Sun Devils go into Kyle Field, go to College Station, and pull off the upset, which might seem like a hot take, but Arizona State, I feel like was really good last year. It's just injuries and um inconsistency at QB. But I think Cutter Boley, former Kentucky Wildcat, could you know kind of be like Sam Levitt, where it's like when he transferred over to Arizona State, he didn't really seem like that great of a player. And then he has these amazing couple years with Arizona State. Now it's at LSU, and I think A&M will be competing for the SEC title. I could see them, losing a non-conference game like this early in the season. But on to Tennessee, Georgia Tech, an old SEC rivalry. When Georgia Tech was back in the SEC, like um, well, a while ago, but should be a good matchup. Two teams who, new QBs, for both teams, kind of, having new coordinators. Tennessee with Jim Knowles now as their defensive coordinator. Um, Georgia Tech, I don't know who their offensive coordinator is now, but Buster Faulkner left to go to Florida with John Summerall. So, new pieces on both sides. Two teams who very much believe they are in the thick of things for the playoffs. And I think GT gets the win. I think the Yellow Jackets at home, they play they play three non-conference power conference teams in Tennessee, Colorado, and Georgia. So those will be some, at least Tennessee and Georgia should be fun games. We'll see about the Colorado game. And the final matchup of week two, Arkansas, Utah. Two teams, new head coaches, um, very exciting offenses. But I'm gonna go with the team that I think is better in the Utes to win, which in these non-conference games in week two, I only have the SEC winning two, which SEC fans are probably going to be like, "How dare you? We're the best conference in the whole world. We should win all of those non-conference games." We'll just have to see. Went on to week three, which there are some matchups that should be pretty easy. Like Tennessee should beat Kent State, Missouri over Troy, Texas and Oklahoma beating UTSA and New Mexico, respectively. But got some big conference games and some non-conference games against ACC schools. Starting off Mississippi State, South Carolina, two schools that very much are hoping to have a breakthrough year. Like South Carolina, every other year seems like they're right on the precipice of breaking through, and then they have a disappointing season. So, does this continue the trend of even years under Shane Beamer where they're really good? Or can Mississippi State, who only won a single conference game last year, can they match that win total here in week 3? I'm gonna say the Gamecocks at home get the win, but I could see Mississippi State going to Columbia and pulling off what would be considered an upset and get a huge um, conference win. Moving on, Florida, Auburn, a old SEC rivalry. Two teams with new coaches, hoping to instill some identity that they haven't had for a while. Like Auburn, it's been a while since they've really had some great seasons like in a row. Florida, you know, it's also been a while for them. So both schools definitely are trying to get a huge early conference win. I'm going to say Florida. I'm going to say the Gators on the road in Jordan Hare get the win. I just feel like this Gators team is so talented. So is Auburn, but I feel like Florida is so talented that I feel like this could be the year where they finally have that breakthrough season. Moving on to Kentucky A&M, which this might be the first time the two have played because Kentucky was in the East, the SEC East, and obviously A&M was in the West. So maybe the first time they've played since A&M's joined the SEC, which was a while ago. Which is kind of crazy to say that like we're having schools play each other for the first time and they've been in the conference for like forever. But that's just how schedules have been. But I'm gonna go with A&M to get the win. Bounce back after a tough loss against um tough loss against Arizona State and get a huge conference win. Alabama, FSU, the rematch of last year when FSU pulls off the upset, um, which I predicted. I thought, Florida State, after a down 2024 season, they would get up and they would be ready to play. Obviously, didn't finish the season well, but were really good. But I'm going to say Alabama gets the win at home. Went on to Georgia, Arkansas. Another possible first time. I'm not entirely sure if this is, but Georgia and Arkansas weren't in the same. Um, they weren't in the same division for the SEC. But all right, they probably played when Arkansas first joined back in the '90s. But I think Georgia gets the win on the road. NC State, Vanderbilt, another ACC SEC game, and two schools that have, if Jared Curtis does get the starting nod, but have two young, exciting quarterbacks, CJ Bailey, Jared Curtis. I do think at home, Vanderbilt gets the win. And then closing out LSU, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin returning to Knoxville, where I'm sure he'll have a great reception there. And I'm going to say Ole Miss gets the win at home, knocking down LSU, which, this could be a huge statement win for Lane Kiffin saying, hey, I was the reason Ole Miss was good for all those years, and they're going to go back to being like a lower tier SEC team. Or Pete Golding could have his Rebels playing really well, and they could say, hey, we're still here to be one of the top teams in this conference. Moving on to week 4, as we're in the thick of conference play, though, still have some games like Kentucky, South Alabama. Kentucky should win that. Arkansas, Tulsa should get the win, but huge matchups. Ole Miss, Florida. This would be an undefeated Gators team at home against Ole Miss, and I'm going to say Florida stays unbeaten, moving to 4-0, which I know seems crazy because of how Florida's played, but this Gators team, I'm really excited to see. And Ole Miss, I think they will be a disappointment. Not going to say that like they're going to miss a bowl game, but I feel like they're going to finish with like maybe 8, 9 wins and like be a really good team, but like they're not going to be that great. and I feel like this could be a breakout year for Florida. A&M, LSU, which has been kind of heated as a rivalry um, ever since A&M joined the um, SEC. The two played rivalry week for a while before, obviously, Texas joined in 2024, and A&M's won back to back against the Tigers, including that huge win last year at Death Valley. I'm gonna say LSU gets their revenge. They knock A&M down to 2-2. We went out to Oklahoma, Georgia, two of the heavyweights in this conference. Um, both teams that definitely want to compete for national championships and want to, prove that they um can they want they are the stretch all of that. I meant to say that two teams that are competing for national championships that clearly believe they have the talent and coaching to be winning it. So this will be a huge matchup early in the season. And I'm gonna say the Sooners go to Athens and pull off the upset, which I know seems crazy, but I mean, remember a couple years ago when Alabama went to Athens when, everybody thought, Alabama's, not as good as they once were. Georgia's now on the upswing. Alabama came in and won that game. I feel like Oklahoma could do the same thing. Vanderbilt, Auburn, two teams, very much in the thick of things. And I'm gonna say Auburn gets their revenge against Vanderbilt, who last couple of years were able to beat them with Diego Favia. But I think the Tigers get their revenge. Texas, Tennessee, both teams here at the bottom because they haven't played a conference game. Um, and I'm gonna say Texas goes into Neyland and pulls off the win, which might seem crazy, but Tennessee, I do think will be better than last year. I do think this defense, but I think the young QB, which when Josh Heupels had an inexperienced quarterback like Nico Iamaleava, or like 2021 when he had both Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton playing some games, Tennessee's offense wasn't at its full force, and I feel like Texas, who definitely believes they can compete and truly will like compete and be dominant. I think they go into Neyland and get a huge win. South Carolina, Alabama is next. The Gamecocks would be undefeated at this point, hoping to get revenge for a couple of bad losses against Alabama, where South Carolina was so close to beating them in 24 and 25. But I'm going to say Alabama wins this. And then Missouri, Mississippi State. I'm going to say the Tigers get the win. Moving on to week 5, where there's still some non-conference games to pick. I think LSU gets the win. I starting off Arkansas A&M, a Southwest Conference rivalry. The Aggies have kind of dominated since the two have been in the SEC, and I'm not really that high on the Razorbacks. I think A&M gets that win, moving to 3-2. Went on Auburn, Tennessee, two teams very much, I feel like, in a similar tier where it's like they both know their talent wise can compete, but haven't really had that success. Um, like haven't had the success recently to where they can claim to be in that tier. So I feel like both have an opportunity this year. I'm gonna say the Volunteers win, beating Auburn, Florida, Missouri. At this point, I have both teams unbeaten at 4-0. this game, the Gators or the Tigers. This is a hard one to pick. I feel like both teams will be really good this year. Yeah, I'm gonna say Florida. I'm gonna say they stay on being 5-0, which might seem crazy, but I think Florida definitely can. It's a hard schedule, the bat, but I feel like they can get the wins. Kentucky, South Carolina. This has kind of turned into a rivalry. I feel like the last couple of years, but I feel like South Carolina has kind of honed in on Kentucky. But I'm gonna say the Wildcats get a huge win. We saw them last year get some impressive wins late in the season when it kind of felt like the team was gonna get maybe one conference win in last year. So I think they could, kind of do what South Carolina did a couple of years ago in Lexington and like not like thoroughly dominate them, but like pull off an upset that like nobody saw coming. Vanderbilt, Georgia, the Bulldogs 3-1. Vanderbilt 3-1. Both teams in the thick of things, and I think Georgia gets the win. And then Bama, Mississippi State. Another one of those old SEC rivalries. I think the Tide stay unbeaten, and we have three teams unbeaten. We got a couple teams with no conference wins so far. We're on to week 6. We got the Red River rivalry between Oklahoma and Texas, and I'm gonna say the Sooners finally get that win. Like the last couple of years, like they last won in 23 when Dylan Gabriel was there. 2024 was not the great year for Oklahoma, and then 2025 with how good they started off, it felt like the Sooners were gonna get back to that win, and then injuries kind of plagued them, and Texas was able to thoroughly dominate them. But I think Oklahoma wins this one a huge boost, and it would knock Texas to their first conference loss. Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, two teams um, that I feel like I'm gonna have not as great a seasons as they did last year, but I'm gonna say Vanderbilt gets their first conference win, dropping Ole Miss to 2-3, which is crazy to say. LSU, Kentucky, the Tigers looking to you know continue their winning ways. They get a Kentucky team that very much I feel like it's kind of in that lower tier of SEC teams where it's like they just are trying to go up the ladder. But I think LSU gets the win. A&M Missouri has also turned into a rivalry, especially from their Big 12 days. Um, and I'm gonna say A&M on the road for the second consecutive season beats Missouri. Georgia, Alabama. I'm gonna go. I think Georgia finally has to end this skid. I just feel like as great as Alabama is, they're gonna lose at least a couple games this season with how many great teams they play, and I feel like Georgia, who last year or last year, everybody thought they were gonna finally be able to win at home. I feel like at I feel like at Bryant Denny, I feel like they've gotta come up with a huge win to knock off the Tide. South Carolina, Florida, the Gamecocks kind of middling down here. I'm gonna say Florida stays unbeaten, moves to 6-0, and then Tennessee, Arkansas, two teams right now very much having disappointing years. And I'm gonna say Arkansas pulls off the upset, which might seem crazy, but they did it a couple years ago. When and Nico Iamaleava played, and I'm gonna say Arkansas gets a huge win, which would be their first. Which only leaves Mississippi State as the only team that hasn't won a conference game. Moving on to week 7 now, where A&M I think beats the Citadel. Alabama, Tennessee. These teams have been going back and forth, and I'm gonna say the Tide lose back-to-back games, which might seem crazy, but it's a tough schedule. Like they play Georgia and then they go to Knoxville. And Tennessee, the last couple of years in Knoxville, has knocked off the Tide. 2022, 24. I think they make it 3 in a row and knock Alabama off. Arkansas, Vanderbilt. I'm gonna say the Commodores get to 5-2. Mississippi State, LSU. I'm gonna say the Tigers get the win. Texas, Florida. I'm sorry, Gators. I'm not gonna have you go undefeated. I think this is where that season, that undefeated season comes to an end. Auburn, Georgia. You know, a huge matchup, especially with Auburn trying to, you know, get back, trying to end this skid, but I don't think it ends. I think Georgia gets the win. I'm gonna say Ole Miss beats Missouri. I think this team is not going to be like a really bad team, but I don't think they're going to be as good as maybe people think they are. And then Oklahoma, Kentucky, I want to say the Sooners stay unbeaten as the only um, team left that hasn't lost a conference game. Though they do have that one loss from Michigan in the non-conference. Oklahoma, Mississippi State. Sorry, Mississippi State. I'm gonna say Oklahoma gets the win. I mean, I do want to get them a win, but it's just hard. LSU, Auburn. I'm gonna say Auburn gets the win. I'm gonna say the Tigers at home get this win. Vanderbilt, Kentucky. I'm gonna say Kentucky pulls off an upset. I mean, these are some hard schedules. Just like in my Big Ten video, I feel like with so many good teams in a conference, nobody's gonna be perfect, and I feel like we're gonna have some teams that definitely will have some losses that most people don't see coming. Alabama, I think, beats A&M. Tennessee, South Carolina. I'm gonna say the Gamecocks win. I mean, South Carolina has had some pretty good upsets in recent years against Tennessee, A&M. I feel like they definitely could have a huge upset here, and then I'm gonna say Texas beats Ole Miss, which 6-1, 6-2 is really competitive conference here. Going on to week 9, South Carolina, Oklahoma. I gotta say the Sooners. I mean, it's hard to pick against them. I think Oklahoma moves to 7-1. Georgia, Florida. Both teams would be 6-1, so the winner of this would put themselves very much firmly. And I'm gonna say it's the Bulldogs. Sorry, Florida. Missouri, Arkansas. What's Missouri? Missouri's 4-3. Yeah, I'm gonna say Missouri gets the win. Auburn, Ole Miss. I've got the Rebels getting a win. And then Mississippi State, Texas. I'm gonna go the Longhorns, which would, 3-way tie right here, but Texas has played one less conference game, which is why Georgia is ahead of them. Went on to week 10 as the season's vastly coming down. Tennessee, Kentucky. I got the Volunteers. Yeah, the win. A&M, South Carolina. Yeah, I'm gonna say the Gamecocks pull off back-to-back weeks of upsets, or well, not back-to-back weeks because it was week 8, but two huge upsets, dropping A&M down. LSU Alabama. I'm gonna say Alabama wins. Oklahoma, Florida. Yeah, I'm gonna say the Gators chomp their way to an upset victory, knocking Oklahoma down. Auburn, I think gets a win over Arkansas. A not A&M, Texas and Missouri. I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna say Missouri pulls off the upset. Georgia, Ole Miss. Sorry, Rebels. I'm gonna say the Bulldogs moved to 8-1, creating some chaos. And then you know what? I'm gonna say Mississippi State beats Vanderbilt. They get a conference win, and don't go conference. They don't go winless in conference play. There you go, Mississippi State fans. You get at least one win. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. Week 11, Texas, LSU. Mm, uh, bleh. I'm gonna say Texas gets the win, which would drop them LSU to 6-4. South Carolina, Arkansas. I'm gonna say Arkansas gets the win. Tennessee, A&M. Both teams kind of floundering in the season. I'm gonna say the I'm gonna say the Volunteers get the win. Missouri, Georgia, gonna go Bulldogs to get the win. Auburn, Mississippi State. What's Auburn? Auburn is 5-4. Yeah, I'm gonna say Mississippi State gets back-to-back conference wins. Oklahoma, I think beats Ole Miss. I'm gonna say Vanderbilt beats Alabama for a second time, and then Florida, Kentucky. No, I'm gonna say Kentucky gets the win. Driving Florida 7-3, which is crazy. They started 6-0, I think, and now they've lost three of their last four. The week 12, rather Mississippi State gets a win. Ole Miss beats Wofford. Bama and Auburn would also get wins here, which would put Auburn bowl eligible. Mississippi State 4-7, so they possibly could finish out the year with the same record, but maybe more conference wins. LSU, Tennessee. I'm gonna say LSU gets the win. Georgia, I think beats South Carolina, though I do think it'll be a good game. Texas beats um Arkansas, right? Oklahoma A&M. I'm gonna say A&M gets the win, knocking off Oklahoma. Missouri, I would say they beat Kentucky, and then Florida Vanderbilt. I'm gonna have Vanderbilt. I'm gonna have Florida get to 8-3, and then rivalry week. Um, Ole Miss, I think, makes it the bowl eligible. But still an impressive season by Mississippi State. I mean, they won two conference games this year and in a much tougher, now 9-game schedule. It does get the win. I'm going to say Florida gets to 9 wins. I'm going to say A&M gets the win. Georgia, I think, beats Georgia Tech. Bama, I think, beats Auburn, but still a successful season, I feel like, for Auburn. Tennessee, Vanderbilt, I'm going to say Vanderbilt gets the win. LSU, Arkansas, all the Tigers finishing 8-4, which this is a disappointing season, but it's a really tough schedule where a lot of things can go wrong. South Carolina, Clemson, interesting. Yeah, let's say South Carolina gets the bowl eligibility. Louisville, sorry, gonna beat Kentucky, which I mean they finished 5-7, and Oklahoma, Missouri. The Sooners win, clinching their ticket to the um, SEC championship game as a really competitive SEC. There's not a lot of teams that, I mean, not some, but a really competitive SEC that I think with the ninth conference game will definitely have these teams losing, an extra game or two that they wouldn't usually lose. And finally, to conference championship week, Oklahoma, Georgia. I'm gonna go with Bulldog. I mean, I know it's chalky, just like I did Indiana for the Big Ten, but it's just hard to um it's just hard to pick against the Bulldogs that I think potentially could get a bye for what, the third year in a row. So this time I think they definitely will rise to the occasion and win and possibly make it all the way to the national championship. But that'll do it for my SEC 2026 season predictions. Hope you guys have a great day. Hope you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Check me out on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, as well as YouTube. And I'll catch you guys in the next video, which will be tomorrow, which is my Big 12 season predictions. But until then, hope you have a great day, and bye.